My live again. That took a little while there. I am so sorry because the computer, the transmographer was not working with the cabannulator, and then the capitzer just exploded and everything went haywire. And so I can get this up, but I can't get up my Facebook page, which I try to see who's on that way. So that will be a little bit of trouble because I need to know who's on second, who's on first. But I will speak to you like you're all on, and I want to share this with everybody, or it's not going to make the difference it needs to make for the world. So, again, this is a very, very important time. Very, very, very important time. Crucial time. We walk with wisdom. We walk with earnestness and deep joy. So I go into the fourth corner of the comfort room. And this is the Yellow House journey. And if you're not aware of it, I'm going to speak the next time. And we're going to start our Hope Church tonight. And it's going to be, again, one of the most significant messages. I just want to start out with WESs, which are wonderful, enlightening stories that will change you forever. Boom, 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 boom. So go with me into this Yellow House journey where I'm entering into a room that the Lord said you have to go in order to become the reformer you want to become. That you can go in before 1,000, 10,000, but nations or betrayal, you got a fissure of rejection, you got a fissure of negation, and I have to heal those up. And in order to do those and build you up and cause you to be the king you're called to be, then you need the Eton College building up. And I had a dream about Eton College. And Bill Johnson was in England, and I called him and I said, find Eton College. Well, Eton College, he didn't know what it was, and wherever he was sharing, they didn't know what it was. We found out it's a place that they develop next leaders, politicians, kings and queens, prime ministers. And so there's this royal upbringing in the body of Christ. There's this beautiful upbringing. And he shared it with me that it all needed to go through the Yellow House. And that if one went through, or if I got all the way through, which I will by his grace, that it's not a question I'd change the world. With his grace, because we'd be those Daniel 11:32, Daniel 12:3 ones that shine like the stars, that enlighten the earth. And so that's what we're called to do and be. So this comfort room, I walked in and there was no one in the room. And the Lord spoke to me. He was weeping over a rock, and he talk to me about how sorry. You can go back and listen to that. I will review next time because I want to jump into the story that I have to share with you. But he just said, basically, nobody's really experienced the deep and true comfort of me. He said there's a whole new understanding to comfort. And I've been unfolding what I saw about it in these last times. I missed a time because I just needed to rest, but I will continue to develop out the understanding of comfort, because in Psalm 73 it says, first he comforted us, then he grabbed us by the hand, and then he guided us into glory. So if you've been wounded, and we're human beings, and it's a thorn in the paw, or it's a deep crevice, or to the heart, or to the mind, he heals that up. And he brings his comfort. He'll kneel and oil our feet. He'll oil whatever area he needs oil with his balm. And he'll come in his comfort. Oh, it's so rich and deep. And it just makes you fall asleep in contentment. There's more to it. But then comfort means to come forth. Now you're confident and you're able to see the God who's bigger and more rich and real and anything. And you're not moved, and you can come forth and be guided into his glory. The glory in you, like David said in Psalms 57, awaken my glory, O God, my original design, who I am. So I just dreamed about those who had brought comfort in the past. And they were ones that when I walked into the room, they were there. And I'm just going to cite an example I did earlier with St. Sebastian. And now I will with Winston Churchill, but my dad as well. And so also Lady Astor, and there's a couple others. So I want to do this because then I saw people that are part of this Hope family that stepped in to the indomitable hope these ones had and the confidence of the goodness of God in the past, present, future. They dwelled on it. They made the Psalms 84 a spring of life. And I'm going to share from the Exodus 15 passage, probably a whole new view of how to see our lives in 2 Samuel 23. So I'm so excited for us because the puzzle pieces in this time will come together and it will give us greater tools and weapons to go forward in. I'm wearing my Jacqueline, you're on, my Jacqueline scarf that means hope. Jacqueline hat means hope. I got my St. Sebastian dog over there just resting at my feet, about 5 feet away. And I got my new hope glasses. Oh, everything looks better now. So let me share. 1874, this one spoke that he was born to me. And Hebrews 12:23, if we get thrown off because somebody comes in a dream that's been in the past, it says that we'll be brought to the mountain of the Lord, or no, we are brought to the mountain of the Lord, city of Zion, that there's a place that we live in heaven and on earth. John 3:12, Jesus said, my feet are on earth, but I'm in heaven. And it's a place where we have to ascend for us to be able to see with the 50 million mile view the God of the earth, the past, present, and future, according to the best view in town, his great goodness and his original design versus magnifying original sin. It is the reality of, he says, oh, magnify me. And what I think of in Psalms 37 says, God be gracious to us, bless us, cause your light and face to shine on us, that we might see the way you see, and the earth be glad. And so Psalms 37, we magnify him, and then it says, there's no shame in us, our faces are radiant, and we inherit the land. So there's this place that he's bringing us where we have a great authority. And so he's showing me ones that I didn't necessarily know if they were believers. And Winston Churchill was one. And he was there, and he was one that spoke to me. But before I share about him, I'm going to share about my own father. My father was there, John Hartley, who was a lover of God, very sincere, great heart, best man I knew, most loving man of the greatest love. And that's 1 Corinthians 13:7. That love is a love that abounds. It gets to 1 Corinthians 13:7. The maturing of love, it's patience, kind. Then it gets to verse 7. Love hopes all things. Embrace that it has a confidence that the love of God and the nature of God in his leadership is greater than the enemy's ability to deceive. His ability to lead people into love and the First Peter fervent love is greater than the enemy's ability to deceive and cause hearts to grow cold. Many hearts, it says, will be challenged, grow cold. That doesn't mean they won't get hot again. And how many is many? Many where, when? Because there's other places that speak of all the, Psalms 22, all the families of the earth will bow and love his name, fiery. I've studied it out. So there's just an opening up of the scripture. There's always progressive revelation. So I'll just say my dad had a past. He lived in Philadelphia, and his father was murdered when he was 2 years old. He owned Hartley Meat Markets, and he was shot making a delivery for another man. You know, it was a man's wife, and he thought that was the driver, and it wasn't. It was my grandfather, and so he was killed. So my dad, at 2 years old, his mother was Mary Londrigan, and she worked in a dress factory. So she would man the front part, the retail store, 8 hours a day, and then 8 hours a day she made the dresses in the back. And he lived in a 2-bedroom place on Ogontz Avenue, which is a tough area in Philadelphia, with his 6 uncles and his mother. And he counted it as such a gift because he said, 7 adults, and I get the love and affection of all of them. And it was just amazing to see in his eyes how he would look past the pain to a love of God that was greater, and a love of people that was remarkable. He became an inner city principal, the youngest in our city at 29, and he developed this reality called play therapy, which is the Yellow House journey. It's to be playful. It's to be celebratory, our growth in God. Counseling gets so morose and inward when the real love of God and the propulsion it goes deep, but it's to lift us, and it's playful and it's rich. And so these were playful saints and witty saints and people. And they were ones that never lost that. A childlike enjoyment and banter with each other. And so my dad had double polio coming out of war, and all he could remember was the people that took care of him during the time. 2 Polish men, a black man he hadn't been around. You know, it was an Irish Catholic area, and he just fell in love with them. And so he came out a man of the war, a man that loved every other individuals. The German soldiers, he was one of those in World War II that when Christmas happened, Christmas Eve, either the Americans or the Germans started singing in World War I. They did it again in World War II, Silent Night, Holy Night. And then they walked out without their weapons and met and sang Silent Night, Holy Night. And then they talked, and they were able enough English and German, and I just didn't want to separate. And then the next day they're back to war, and my dad just had made a decision that he was going to lift hope up and just community and unity and in Jesus. And so one thing though my dad didn't get free of when he was in war or he was an inner city principal was this disdain for wealthy people. He was a communist, a Trotskyite. I mean, he wasn't hardcore, but he just thought people that are sharing common, he just had no desire for any earthly goods, which was beautiful. It was a little tough being his children because it wasn't, he didn't think about it for us. And, there was a lot about his upbringing that you would understand that. But there was a little lake house he got that was $5,000. And he and my mother and 5 of us children, we'd go stay in there, and it just had no running water. And but it was just where we stayed during the summer. And down the street, it was woodsy and right on the lake. And I mean, we had to walk about 300 yards to the lake, but just a few doors down, you had a house that was $500,000 back then. And it was a lot of money. And it was a lawyer's house. And the lawyer had always looked down on, we had a whole station wagon. We had this dog named Dolly that would go into the lawyer's yard and go number 2 and then sit in it. I don't want to, he got just, and the woman, they did not like the dog. They were praying. And then we'd sneak over and be jumping off their boathouse at 12:30 at night. And so there was room for this real clash to happen. So my dad found out the dog had done that, and he went down to apologize to the lawyer, and he was gone a few hours because we thought he's not going to like, he's wealthy and he seems snooty. And he had played chess with him. They had hit it off. And he was kind of anti-God, real anti-God, to tell you the truth. And he was just rough man, But my dad started just witty banter with him. And he would say things like my grandmother my dad would say, "It's a beautiful day, Lenny." And he'd say, "Going to rain tomorrow. My dock's going to be underwater," and all that. And my dad would say, "Probably snow." And he'd say stuff like, my dad lost 7 jobs as a principal. You'd work during the summer, try and make more money for your kids. And so my dad lost 8 jobs at one summer and, had tried to be a women's buyer for underwear for Macy's. And he put on 2 different colored socks. He didn't know what he was doing, So he made it a few days. He's fired. Then he tries to be a carpenter and he can't hit a nail straight and he's fired there, and it keeps going. So Lenny is this self-made millionaire, and I said, "Jack, how do you do that when you got a family to support? You lose 8 jobs." And it was a little degrading, and my dad said, "Lenny, you're wrong. I lost 9 jobs. You forgot about this one." And I had said the same thing to my grandmother, and he knew who he was, and he knew he was loved by God, and he knew life was good. And he just loved that little lake house, loved his pontoon boat. But he challenged Lenny because my dad was really good in chess, so Lenny didn't have a chance. And he saw horseshoes outside Lenny's house. So he challenged Lenny to play horseshoes. And so they would play, and all of us would go and watch. And it goes from us just watching because of banter. And my dad would dress up with these huge sunglasses, and they'd come out to here and around, and he'd have his garb on. He looked like, who was it, played piano? It starts with this L, Liberace. He looked like Liberace because he was the champ. And, he might have won one game, the last game, and Lenny would come out, and I'll tell you what it ended up. It ended up a tournament, and they let us all play. I'm young, and they were really good. The adults would practice. They'd come from around the lake, and it'd always be my dad and him in the finals, and they're just both kind of heads and shoulders above everybody. And then Guthrie got close, but it was they set this up for weeks, and Lenny would come out. I remember one time his daughters, he had 3 beautiful daughters, and his wife, they're carrying in this Roman, like for Caesar, it's got the shoulder bamboo poles, and then on top of it, it's, this big like tent, and he's coming out, and he's waving his wand as the victor, and they have this music playing, and then he has this walk that he walks in, and my dad has a limousine pull him up, and and that has a bodyguard that comes out with him. Bobby Bell was my friend, and so him, it just got, we just came alive to see two adults playful, and this witticism and this banter, classic statements and classic fun, and all of us children, and the unity. And then when there were tough circumstances, Lenny'd say something about it. My dad would say that, like, probably going to snow, and he'd just cut him off, this bitter thinking. And so I saw after that, and I could go on, but I'll tell you one more thing. Lenny O'Neill, my mom and dad were like Ma and Pa Kettle. Never been anywhere, just didn't have money in that, besides Philadelphia and Missouri. Well, Lenny pays for them to go to Las Vegas. So my dad studies up, and back then you could count cards, and he just had a great mind. So he brought, $100. Well, Lenny gave him $400 or more. So he won $500 with that $500, and then he quit, but Lenny says, let's go to a show. So they go to a show, and they're in the front seats. Lenny's paid big money to get them right up front. And this chorus line of women comes out, and they don't have tops on. And they're doing the legs up and all that. And my dad is just absorbed. He's just consumed. And my mom is looking at him. She's going to slap him silly. And Lenny is there looking at him, wondering what's going on, because he's just as pure can be. I never heard my dad cuss. Never heard him cuss. Never heard him even say anything close to rude words, or crude words. And so Lenny and his wife, Mary, they're looking at him. And my dad turns to my mom and hits her, and he says, "Ann, look at those elephants." Because there's elephants behind the women, and kind of coming in and out. And she said, "What about the women without their tops on?" And he looks and he goes, "Oh my!" And that's real. It's real. I don't understand. I didn't see it, so they're out of there, But just what happened when Lenny died. My dad had died before Lenny. And my dad had this rose garden that was beautiful to him, and his ashes were put there. I don't know what you think about preserving the body, but that just was what happened. And when Lenny died, his funeral was more about my dad than it was about Lenny's feelings for my dad. And he asked to be buried where Jack Hartley was buried, and his ashes were laid there. And that's happened a couple other times for my dad, that men looked at him and just looked at this indomitable hope and ability to see good in the past, present, and future. And it was according to God's original design. And my dad was just confident if you lifted that up, if you reached for the seed of good in others, and you didn't discount them, if you didn't cancel them, if you didn't twist their perspectives, then and you understood them and you valued them, that they would, rise to that by the grace of God. And even if they didn't, they were worthy to be treated that way. And so the witticisms, if you would have heard them talking to each other, you thought, oh, they're being hard on each other, but they weren't, they just were funny, and they never got to be, caustic. But Winston Churchill was there, and he was in this fourth corner of the comfort room about the past, present, and future. And he said that he used to have this black dog by his bed, and somebody had to be there to help him sleep because it was a fear of the past, present, future was a demon. And so what set him free was the sense, he told he didn't tell in the king's speech, but he shared a little of what his fear was for public speaking and some other things, which was really real. But this sense that I would call it, he had a heavenly encounter and he went above the clouds and he just said, I saw, it's like Martin Luther, I had a dream. And he had seen something and it was a promise. And he saw a promise for the furthering of Israel, or not Egypt, England, I'm sorry, and the people of England. And it just was so real that everything else it was like he had already won. I mean, the perfect example for me is I wrestled a young man. I was a young man in a tournament, and I just was able to win pretty easily. And afterwards, he came down and he wanted to box me. And I could box, but that wasn't the point. The point was I just treated him with care and love because I knew it injured his heart and pride that, he had just gotten beat pretty good. And we have a people in the world without Christ, they've been beat, and they've been beat pretty good by those of us who know him and love him. We just have the upper hand in so many ways. So I can't imagine being without him and his presence for a moment. And they're responding like the young man did to me with attack and causticness and twisting. And I was just able for the next 3 years in wrestling to become his friend and to care for him and start to have fun with him, where I'd say, okay, you're going to hit me. That's going to hurt. But I was better than that at the time, But I looked at like Winston Churchill and Lady Astor, Lady Astor was the first parliament appointee as a woman. And so Churchill said to her, to cause us World War III, if this kind of statement was said, and he said, having a woman in parliament is like having a woman go to the men's bathroom. And she said to him, well, you have no concern because you're not handsome enough for anybody to follow you in the bathroom, men's bathroom. And she said it better than that. She said, Sir Churchill, that's another one. But so they started this banter, and they really ended up with this respect and appreciation for one another. And he said something profound about her. He said she was a sheep in sheep's clothing. And that's beautiful. And said, truly, she was a modest woman. And, it just seemed like if you study her quotes, they're incredibly out there. I mean, just proud and strong, hear me strong. But in the truth, she was a modest woman, he said, and she had a lot to be modest about. So in other words, she had many gifts and talents, and she was extraordinary in wisdom. And she said to him in the parliament, at a party afterwards, she said, Sir Churchill, if I was your wife, I'd poison your tea. And he said, if I was your husband, I'd drink it. And then she said, Sir Churchill, you're drunk at a party. And he said, that's right, lad. He asked her, and he said, you're ugly. And he said, thus I will wake up sober the next day and you will still be ugly. He didn't mean it. And just, I miss the banner and the witticisms because she wasn't moved by that. She was a pretty woman. She was a classy woman. And so they're discussing what they're going to wear for some party that they masquerade as something like Halloween, but it was something else. And she said, Sir Churchill, I have a novelty. She said, how about you come as sober? So I just love the people in my life that love me enough to have fun with me and celebrate and bring me to past mistakes and not cause it to be brittle and fractured. And I can't say anything in certain worlds now without being told, by that you can't say that, you can't do that, you can't. And it's, your heart, and there's an opening up of a people that are going to celebrate each other and be able to laugh at each other's strengths and weaknesses. It's like my friend Kim Callow, just how you can celebrate the past, present, future with it, because Kim's got such a humble heart, very gifted prophetically. And, he goes to these friends he had. I didn't know him at that time. But the friends tell us, and how Kim, after one of our Saturday night meetings, they had been telling Kim about their grandmother that made homemade sausage and how wonderful it was. And it's outside of St. Louis, which is about 5.5 hours from us, the place it was in Potosi or somewhere, and a little town. Grandmother has this wooden floor cabin. So they call her about 1 o'clock in the morning and say, we're coming. And they come and they're so excited, and they get there about 5:30 or later, and she's been cooking away, and all of a sudden it's done, and they're sitting at the table, and she hands it to Kim as a guest of honor, and he grabs the whole plate. It's one of those huge plates filled with sausage stacked like that, and he turns, and the grease, he tips it. It's out on the floor, and there's these two, farm dogs, and they were so depressed, and they just had fun with him forever versus getting on him, and I lived with him and about 6 other guys, and there was always something with him. Now, there are things that people can get on him about, but it was just so enjoyable to celebrate life, celebrate the humanity of somebody and their perfect imperfections. And so I saw those that celebrate past, present, future. Like, I had a fraternity, and we had things that happened, but any of us look at it, and it was always filled with, we were lifted, we were always going to head forward, and that's the way we are with one another. And I believe that God is giving us people that are comforted immediately in their past, present, and future, and see, no, there's a greater side to this. It's like in my college with Michael J. Haggerty, and we give each other a hard time, He'd tell me Camp never did a thing. So, he had a lot of phrases, but, we were supposed to do the talent show, and we hadn't practiced or nothing, and all these fraternities, sororities practicing for months. And so about 4 days before, Haggerty was in charge of the Do Nothing Committee. And he said, Do Nothing Committee is going to do something. Every meeting he'd get up and say, Do Nothing Committee didn't do a thing, doesn't have any members, never going to have any members, never going to have any meetings, and we are committed to do nothing. Sit back down, but it was better than that. And so they got up and said, Do Nothing Committee is going to do something. We're going to do the talent show. And he said, Hartley's going to lead it. So we get it together, and he can do imitations. I bring my little brother who is third in the world in karate, breaking all kinds of stuff. We do this murder mystery, and we just make it up as we go, and we end up winning the talent show. but then we get rebuked because my little brother had gone to school there, but wasn't at that time. But the point was, it's just awesome, turning things into a celebration. We got kicked out of the fraternity. 1896, nobody got kicked out, but all of us wrestlers were house trained. We took sledgehammers and broke the wall between the dorm rooms and made them suites. And so that was enough, and we unpaid. And so, same thing, Harry gets up, do nothing committee is going to do something. We're going to save the fraternity. And they said, how? And he said, Hartley. So we go out raising money for the fraternity to get back. And I did part of it, but another Gary Irvin stepped in, Phil Klein, who was our attorney general in Kansas. And it was just this celebrating the past, present, future, and just this feeling that all was well because God's in charge. And we were really, in our own way, acknowledge God. We weren't all following his ways 100%, but there was a real respect and appreciation for each other and for God. And we never allowed ourselves to get disappointed in a human being. And so these are ones that did. My dad, I never saw him get disappointed in a human being, and he had a lot of opportunities to do that. So I share that with you because you're disappointed in human beings or disappointed in life. We've missed the goodness of God, and that's a serious reality, and become these Greek critical thinkers that don't appreciate first, but challenge and critique and judge. And so I saw these ones standing by these people, like Leo Biscaya, I could name some others, Brother John, different ones I met along the way that just exuded this gratefulness to God and this perspective that was the best view in town. And it's powerful to be comforted in our past, present, and future. The Lord spoke to me when I was 15. I was living in my brother's Volkswagen. I had moved out of home. I'd gotten angry. My mom was bedridden, and it just was horrible around the house. And I hit her door with my fist, and I went way beyond I knew. I went to my dad. I said, I got to leave. I know I've gone off the rails. And I said, tell me why mom does what she does. And it was beautiful. I won't get into that story, but I'm in a Volkswagen. I made the choice and I left. And my older brother put $20 in the pocket every night. He was the only one that had the key, and he'd do it when I didn't know. And I had the Lord speak to me, and I didn't know him at 15, really didn't know him. I mean, Catholic boy, but I had him speak and said, I got you covered till you're 82. And it just solved it for me. Because we were a poor family. I had to, just everybody's had challenges. But, I started working at 8. It was real, and buying my food and buying clothes. And so but I wouldn't have it any other way. And so I saw ones that were standing by. And Jacqueline, if you're on this, you do such a wonderful job of prophetic words for people that are words of life, arrows of life. I'm going to start in a minute with the real session for tonight, about a prophetic comfort for the past, present, future, and give this context. It's going to be really significant. And it's prophetic to where we're at. And I'm going to speak to some, but just I want to open with a picture of like Sebastian, the saint who saw God in the past, present, future, celebrated him. And I saw also the second crew of people that celebrated God and celebrated people. So Saint Sebastian celebrated life, celebrated his life. And you would think with his challenges, No, he saw it a whole different way. That's what they said about him. Now we have the Sebastian the dog that's doing the similar things. I mean, you can see God in so many ways. And then I just speak of those who celebrate life in their relationships, in the past, present, future, and don't allow the enemy to say that was lost. Right after, this has now been 5, 6 years ago, but after being married 32 years, my wife, just many reasons that somebody can get hurt or we can, and just grow distance. But, there's that, this wasn't any ever good, and my spiritual memories were gone. I just couldn't remember hardly anything about all the good and all the wonder. And Mike Bickle said to me, and Bill Johnson said, you had 32 great years. You have 4 beautiful children. And there was a restoring of that was good. And it was a gift. And I'm not going to have that stolen. And so I could talk openly, deeply about that. But right now, I want to make sure I just share with you that the celebrating of people from the past, present, and future is essential for us to move on in God. It's more than forgiving. It's forgiving, obviously. I don't want to say more than, but it's seeing the promise for that time in that relationship. Always when people ran into a challenge that could cause them, like Naomi, to lose a sense of the goodness of God in their lives, he would call them to see the promise. And so I will be sharing about that very specifically here in a moment. Because I thought resentment, bitterness is replaced by forgiveness. It's replaced by a future promise. Well, sometimes it's the hardest to see when you've been disappointed. So for tonight, I saw an olive, and an olive was going to be an olive tree. But they always have life, and they always bring in life. They're fed right, and then they give off this oil to everybody about the past, present, and the future. It's Pollyanna. I had the Lord speak to me because it's been played in different plays and movies about a young girl that had a perspective that Polly is grace, many grace, Anna grace, Polly's many grace. Many graces see him through the lens of grace, many places. And the Lord spoke to me at a point where I thought, that's just, silly children's deal. And I saw one that was real sincere, and he said something like, if everybody was a Pollyanna, that would be 1% of how much hope and joy I have. And I want you to experience. It was very stunning and real. And so Olive will begin to enter into that. And Olive is from this next generation that's to be more like the Solomon generation with peace and attunement. The problem is the attunement has gone to, and it's always challenged to go to right places or wrong places, and tuning with division and pain is not what we're going to tune to. So Olive and I wrote SHAWAN was the greatest gift that's Shauna. That's Shauna and Chad. So it's very important that this one will give them an awesome perspective. Can you guys hear me? Good. And also there was James Gall. James Gall would celebrate people that had some dinks. rough characters that are alive and that would pass on, and it would be some of the ones that have been written off in the body of Christ too easily. And often leaders or others are just written off so easily. And it's a wrong way that we're to heal one another. And you know, I think we're all aware that this is a place that's a must change. And so he was celebrating LUIS, Lewis, PALU. And he was going to do the documentaries on people's lives and show them in the light of the goodness of God with their mistakes. The John Paul Jacksons, the Bob Downs, the John Limbers, the others that had a lot of influence that have never been written of. You know, and I could name some of those with James, but it'd be private and it'd be people that were on his radar that I might not ever known, but you know, tempted to say the names now. But if somebody can write James and share with him that it's just part of it, and I'm just so proud of him because that's a unique heart that sees past the difficulties. And I've had experience. James baptized me a long time ago, and we're both in the same church, and I saw him get disappointed in a person, but I saw him fight for understanding, and the other person wasn't fighting back that much to do it. I mean, by that was just hurt and wasn't going to respond. And James went to them for forgiveness and then had real appreciation for them. It was one of the most beautiful things that I saw. And now he's going to do that across the body of Christ. He's going to have brothers sit down and sisters that have had things twisted in their understanding of each other. And he's going to bring forth love. It's a great gift. It's a great gift of reconciliation. And there's some that I will share with him. Terry Johnson was one of those that she brought the hummingbirds back. And hummingbirds can fight. I didn't realize that. But these were hummingbirds that were at peace. And what I know about hummingbirds is that they obviously can flap their wings very fast, and they can dart and move. And it was the lightning bugs in the body of Christ. Those who hum with a special tune, and that God will transport them almost to places where they need to bring healing. And they've been hurt, the hummingbirds, because they're here and then they're gone, and people will think they're flighty, but no, they're called like Philip to be translated, transported different places, and they go here and light up, and then they go here and light up. And we don't want to cage lions or lightning bugs or hummingbirds. So that's for Terry Johnson. I saw her, and I saw the Lord say it. I saw our Ann, and I love Ann. And I saw her with ashes. And I got to remember, but she was bringing these ashes forth in beauty. And I saw different ones. And again, I'm going to ask her to pray for Jen Johnson. I'm going to ask her to pray for a few others that are going to pray for Tiger Woods, that he's ready. And he's not far from you. And so whenever I get that, I've been with, unique people and leaders. It always comes and it happens, there's a way made. I got to be aware of it. Sometimes I get to initiate a letter, but that's just pray about that. There's ones that are ready right now that will surprise us because of what they've gone through, and now they're ready. I ask you all to pray for Jeffrey Zuckerberg because I think that there's something happening there, and unless you have this sense of God in somebody's life, he's got this goodness in the past, present, future, and we can point to him, Jeffrey, where his original design came forth and how much it blessed people. We don't have to tell all the other. We point that out, and you say that's the nature of Jesus in you. There's a way to put others' hands into his hands, and it'd be the most inviting thing. We'll talk about next time where we have to go to be able to reach back and put people's hands into his hands. Last story, and just some prophetic words to people. And again, more than stories, happenings. I've been going into this comfort room number 4, corner number 4, which was comfort in the past, present, future. And it was people that just had this sense of tomorrow things are going to be better, and they're always better. You always enjoy the day, but it's always better tomorrow. And that the Lord showed me my life, 0 to 12, 12 to 18, 18 to 30, 30 to 50, and then 50 on, and said after 50, best days of your life. But every time and season had a goodness in him. If I wouldn't have prayed for that 80-year plan that's going to be 100, I wouldn't have had that pillar or memorial stone fixed for that time, that I was certain of the promises and just a sense of even challenges would come, but there was this goodness in each season of the Lord that was pleasant, that was joyful, that freed me from misery, made me more alive. So I dreamed, I saw in this visit from the Lord, because I want you to know that it's going to be commonplace for us to be like Job. He said, I heard you with the hearing of the ear in Job 42:3, but now I see with the seeing of the eye. And then he looked at all of his life as a blessing. There's many examples of that. He had kind of given himself to the bitter waters, and God opened up his goodness in Job 38-42. And so I saw JRM, and I had to look up JRM. He was a tall, thin man. He was born in 1969, and he had gone to Eton College, which I spoke of earlier, trains prime ministers and public people. And I saw him, and he had gone to a place called Trinity too, place which is a college in England, I believe. And so it was, true, because I woke up and I asked others, and they looked it up, and I'm technologically deficient, but he was one with indomitable hope, and he was an honorable member of the Leaders of Commons, and he showed what a politician should be like. And people showed me articles about him, and generally they were not the most complimentary. But then you just put in YouTube, JRM, Jesse, I can't remember the rest of his name, but he's the leader of the Commons, and it will tell you, or it'll show you the bright soul that this man has. And there's nothing but victory in him. And there's just nothing but brilliance and humor. So the English Parliament can be very caustic, very, very caustic, like we hear Nancy Pelosi or others. It's just, gosh, it's just so rough, it's just so degrading. And he is courteous, he's caring, he's patient. He has a humor. So there was a man that I saw in one of the little YouTube clicks that was from the other side, the liberal side, who quoted Waterhouse, and that he is a very learned man. He's Shakespeare. He's got memorized, and so lots of passages from different writings. But he says something from Waterhouse. And he said, well, let me quote back from Waterhouse. He said, there was a little man, and this is a quote, that was poured into his suit and forgot to say when. Little chubby man. And that's exactly the guy. So people that are against him have to laugh and celebrate because of his humor and his care. And so I need to tell you more about him when I start the next one, because I need a bathroom break. I love you. This will be good. Get ready. Caitlin?